Hello there. This video chapter is on chapter 8. It's about transitions, introductions, and conclusions. Let me share this screen so that way we can get going on this. Introductions, transitions, and conclusions are three parts of the speech that most audiences expect to hear. Consequently, you can rely on these three expectations to create a sense of rhythm with how you structure your speech, signaling to the audience each part of an internal preview, enumerations, and of course, when you are coming to your conclusion. It's all an internal summary. To establish goodwill, that's where it comes in as the introduction. It should establish a general sense that you care about the audience and have thought about them in advance of the speech. And so you do want to bring that goodwill into your introduction. Why is it important for them to listen to this speech? Why is it important for you to tell it? So you have to bring that goodwill into your introduction. Also, in your introduction, you want to establish your credibility off the bat. Along with the conclusion, the introduction is part of your speech in which you establish the authority as the speaker. It's a place where you say either directly or indirectly that you are qualified as a speaker and can be trusted. And it was also discussed in terms of ethical speaking in chapter 2. So your credibility refers to your ethos or the character-based focus of public speaking. Now, when you do establish your credibility, that could either be something that is yourself as an example, as a firsthand experience, or it could be something as citing a source. Either way, you are bringing credibility to not just yourself, but to what you're about to inform your audience about. And so you have to establish that sense of credibility or that form of credibility literally off the top of your speech within the first couple of minutes, if not maybe the first minute. That's something that you have to really think about and establish and be very strategic about once you begin your introduction. Also, you explain why you are actually speaking. It's not just, hey, I'm just going to talk and then call it a day like that. The introduction is when the audience learns about your purpose and it's expressed in your thesis statement and how you will speak towards the purpose with the preview of your main points. So, just so you understand, you introduce, you get an attention getter, you start establishing your credibility within your introduction, you present your thesis statement, and then you start previewing as to what you're actually going to be talking about. You just don't go straight into something. You have to preview what you are going to talk about. Obviously, because we don't know what your three main points are going to be, you're going to have to tell us that in your introduction. So that's something also to remember in your introduction. A first impression is the most important impression. Tips of starting of a good speech, I believe it's on page 164. Get the attention, like I said, in the interest of your audience. It's how your attention getter is. It could be startling, it could be a fun fact, it could be a question. Reveal the topic of your speech in your introduction. Establish your credibility and your goodwill. And again, preview the body of your speech. You have to make your speech or you have to make your speech as relatable as you possibly can. And the way to do that is establish that in your introduction. And if you can relate the topic to your listeners, they are much more likely to be interested in everything that you have to say thereafter. State the importance of your topic. If you think your topic is important to you, tell your audience why you think that they should be listening to you as well. Get the audience and the interest of your audience, or get the attention, I should say, and the interest of your audience. You can startle them. You can arouse their curiosity. You can question your audience, but don't just say, "Hey, how many of you?" Blah 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 blah. I mean, it's a very common way to start. Arouse their curiosity. That's always a good one with a startling fact. Maybe begin with a quote, and then you can also tell a story. You can tell a hypothetical, or if it's a first hand, you can also do that as well. Now, I want you to also keep these five things in mind because they're going to come back later on. Next, you're going to want to reveal your topic, basically your thesis statement. State it clearly of your speech, and if you don't, then what may happen? We may not know what's really going on with your speech. And then, of course, preview your speech in a preview statement. I'm sorry that this looks very small on the screen. Typically, I don't do that, but of course, I want to get as much in as I possibly can. So, your connectives, which are your transitional phrases that connects from one point to another, from your introduction to your first main point, to your second main point, to your third. You have to have all those. And of course, even from the last main point to your conclusion, there's always a transition. Words or phrases that join one thought or another and indicate the relationship between them, not without them. Without them, they can be seem disorganized and disjointed. You can also do transitionals like, well, the first cause is this. And then when you go into your second one, now that I've told you the first cause, I'm going to start talking about the second cause. And then, of course, when you're going into your third main point, you can say, I've just told you about the first and the second cause. I'm now about to discuss the third cause. So that's the last one. That's your last bullet point there. And that's just a very simplistic way of doing things. But again, it's also a very clear and concise way. And it also connects, and we're not disconnected. We don't know, we'll know exactly when you're going from one point to another. There are also other ones out here, like the second, I should say third one, third bullet point. I have spoken so far of Cesar Chavez, the community organizer, but it was his work as a labor leader that truly etched his name into American history. And then you go into another point. Signposts, brief statements that indicate exactly where you at in the speech. Frequently, they are numbers. So think of it that way. I've told you a clear understanding of the problem. Let me share with you a solution. That's your second main point. So it's like you're going from one to the other, and you really need that connective so that way we can stay intact and continue to follow along with you. Now, concluding your speech is a way of signaling the end. You do have to reinforce the idea. Remember what I told you to think about in the five points of your introduction? Well, you can basically do the same exact thing for your conclusion. You can end with a quote. You can actually end with the same exact quote that you started with. You can refer back to your introduction, make a dramatic statement, and end with a bang. What you want to do is basically, before I go into this slide right here, is bookend your introduction as well with your conclusion. What you started with your in your introduction should be able to literally reinforce it and mirror it in your conclusion. Everything else is the body of your speech. What you want, how you started with your thesis, how you started with your introduction, and the preview should be the same exact way going into your conclusion. So if you started with a quote, by all means, end with a quote. Don't forget that when you previewed in your introduction, you should also reinforce all your points in your conclusion, saying, tell the audience this is what I talked about, so on and so forth. And then go from there with your thesis as well. Don't forget to reinforce your thesis statement and your central idea. And then you finish off with your bang, meaning like some sort of lasting sentence or an impression, because that's exactly what you want to do. As with the introduction, keep an eye out for possible concluding materials as you research and develop the speech. Be creative in devising a conclusion that hits the hearts and the minds. Don't get too long winded. I know it's trying to like stretch out that 5 to 7 minutes. You should be good. Don't leave anything in your conclusion to chance. Work it out in detail and give yourself plenty of time to practice and deliver that, because a lot of times, public speakers, or at least ones that aren't, in the beginning stages, they tend to like forget about, we tend to focus on our body, and then we basically just leave the introduction and the conclusion out to dry. Like we don't put as much focus, when in fact we need to like figure out how to grab the attention and then bring it back around. And then when we bring it back around, we don't give our conclusion as much attention as it should. And that really is a shame. I think that could be it could be said that it's a great thing. Here's something to look at as well, and this really has to do with transitional phrases. Emily Berenson was speaking to her class about voter ID, and she had rehearsed the speech several times and had a well-defined central idea, three sharp main points and strong evidence to support her position. But then all of a sudden, she got up to deliver the speech, and she said, "All right." Every single time when she moved from one thought to the next. And after a while, her classmates started counting. By the end of the speech, most were too busy waiting for the next "all right" to pay attention to Emily's actual message. And afterward, Emily said, "I never thought about saying all right." And then all of a sudden, she just gets it popped out. And then she just didn't know what to do and what else to say. And it just kept on going. So we do have those stock phrases, myself included, that we use to fill the space between the thoughts and in casual conversation as well. And they are seldom troublesome, but when you are publicly speaking, it's a different story altogether because then you give your audience something to focus on that has nothing to do with your speech. You know, the like this, like that, those are fillers, those are spacers. And even the is a spacer. Speech making, they distract listeners by calling attention to themselves. And what does she need to do aside from practicing? There is one thing that you do need to consider, that if you find yourself practicing and you may be saying the word, or you're in the middle of your speech and you realize that the like or the or what did she end up saying, all right every single time. And if you catch yourself doing that, then the best thing for you to do is just take a pause. And it's a dramatic pause. But and although we don't know that you're trying to stop yourself, you are strategically stopping yourself. And at the same time, you're not causing a distraction. If anything, we may think that, hey, they're having a good time pausing and maybe they're collecting their thoughts, and it's actually better than what you can possibly expect. So that is chapter 8, and that has to do with your introduction as well as your conclusion and transitions. So I hope that you learned a great deal when it came to this chapter. And if not, then you can just easily go back and look at not only the slide, but also the book. And also remember that your introduction and your conclusion, as well as your transitions, are just as important as the rest of your speech. Although the meat and potatoes are there, but what gets us going in terms of the audience is how you capture our attention, and how it is sustained throughout, and then of course your lasting impression. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned a lot. Any questions, you know where to go. Thank you.